Welcome back for part 7 of the David Michael Crawford serial arson case on Crime to Burn. We've discussed some exceptionally disturbing allegations made by Crawford's daughter. We've discussed victims that awoke to find cars on fire, victims that discovered garages on fire, victims that suffered property damage and emotional distress at the hands of David Crawford. But today we will be covering the last name on the hit list that investigators found in Crawford's phone. The notation simply said Evelyn 2, just a name and a number. Words that written in another context might sound so innocent and unthreatening, like a dinner reservation, or a score of par on a mini golf course. But the crimes for which they stand in this instance will steal the innocence from those words and open a door to a living nightmare endured by Evelyn Henderson, her husband Scott, and their teenage daughter. Crawford was convicted of attempting to murder Evelyn, her husband, and daughter. And I'll apologize now if this episode lacks some of the levity we try to interject into these episodes, but Crawford terrorized this family for over a year, destroying their home, harassing them, inserting himself where he wasn't wanted, and then returning for a horrific encore performance. Find out what happened to the Hendersons right now on Crime to Burn. Welcome to Crime to Burn, where we explore the dark, sooty landscape where true crime intersects with arson and criminal negligence. Join us as we sift through the ashes to bring you the story of what really happened. Welcome back to Crime to Burn. I'm April, a fire protection engineer and former firefighter.
And I'm the other white meat.
A quick reminder that the best thing you can do for any podcast is leave a 5-star rating and a written review. And remember, if you've already rated us on one platform, nothing is stopping you from giving us a rating on another one.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
You can find links to all the platforms where you might find us in the link tree in the bio of all our social media pages. Once again, we've secured ourselves the number 2 spot on Good Pods, so thank you to everyone that uses Good Pods for keeping us ranked over there. It means so much. And if you're not following us on social media, including Instagram, X, Facebook, and YouTube, you are missing out on some awesome posts that I make over there, including debunking arson myths. So go follow, subscribe, and when you see content from us, it's super helpful if you'll give it a little thumbs up or a heart, but it's even more helpful if you share it, if you comment on it, or you send it to a friend. Also, I keep forgetting to point this out, but if you follow me on Instagram and your account is private, I probably haven't followed you back because I presume that if your account is private, you don't want me as a follower, and that's just fine with me. But if you followed me and I've not followed you back and that is upsetting you, just drop me a message on that platform and I do check my messages and I'll follow you back. You can always find us at crimetoburn@gmail.com. If you have any information about this case that you'd like to share with us, please do email us. We can leave you off the record. We would love to hear from you about any constructive feedback you have as well. As I mentioned in the intro, this episode's probably going to sound a little more somber, but even if we have occasion to joke around, I want to make it very clear that I'm not minimizing the trauma Crawford's victims endured, not the trauma of this family that we're about to discuss, nor the trauma of any of the families we've already discussed. Humor is a coping mechanism for many of us, and we never mean to minimize the experiences of the victims, but we are here for entertainment. And sometimes when things get heavy, we joke around. And that's to keep people interested and invested. And also because this is a really important story, I think, to tell for a lot of reasons. I'm not going to go into all of them. But remember that this case is pending appeal right now in Howard County. The appellate brief was filed in July. The state responded with their brief in September. And so any minute now, a panel of judges will decide if this guy gets a new trial.
So if all this is a little confusing and you need to know when you can laugh, when it's appropriate to, I'll let you know.
Also, as a reminder, I did solicit some information in our last episode, and so if you have anything additional to add or anything that you think we should consider, like theories or connections that we haven't made, you can always email us at crimetoburn@gmail.com. You can remain off the record. I don't have a staff, so when you email us, you are actually just getting me. It's just a conversation between me and you. The things that I'm specifically looking for some information on, if you have them, I want any information you have, but I was looking for information on additional fires that occurred in the Laurel area that are unsolved that may be connected to Mr. Crawford. I was also looking for information from anyone that was involved in the Anne Arundel County investigation of Carrie's harassment. And finally, I heard a rumor, and I'm not saying this is true or this actually happened. It is an unsubstantiated rumor that there may have at some point in Crawford's career been a little skirmish with another police officer that resulted in a boat fire of some kind. So if anyone knows about that, let me know.
I'm not trying to start any crap, but if you know about any crap,
I want to hear about it. I'm open for the crap. Alright, without further ado, everyone grab your emotional support object because we're ripping off the band-aid on a pretty deep wound. There's rarely a good reason to get a phone call at 3:30 a.m. It's that time of night where the night owls are usually nodding off or have nodded off, and the early birds haven't quite gotten up yet, except for you.
I'm up before you, early birds.
There are rumors that 3:30 a.m. is the witching hour where paranormal activity happens. I don't put much stock in this, but I will agree that the phone call Scott Henderson received at 3:30 a.m. September 22nd, 2018 was ominous. Scott was sleeping soundly, and so he did not wake up in time to answer it. But his wife, recognizing the unusual nature of the pre-dawn phone call, shook him awake and insisted he return the call, which had come from a neighbor that lived across the street from their home. A home that they weren't sleeping in on this particular night. A home that had burned a year prior. A home that had been unlivable for nearly a year. A home that had gone through 9 months of rebuilding. A home that they were weeks away from moving back into. When Scott called his neighbor back, someone at the other end of the line said to him, "I'm sorry, buddy. It's worse than before. It's gone. The house is gone." And just like that, the 9-month-long nightmare the Hendersons had been about to close the book on began all over again. And it wouldn't end until 2023, when the man responsible was found guilty of being the author of their terror. But to understand the gravity of those words Scott Henderson heard through the phone at 3:30 a.m. in September of 2018, we have to go back to an earlier time. A time before the Hendersons inadvertently drew a target on their backs. We have to go back to 2013. The Hendersons had moved to the Dunlogan neighborhood in Howard County about a year before this. They had adopted a rescue dog they named Scooby. In court, Evelyn described Scooby as, quote, kind of messed up, unquote. However, he was their beloved pet, and they were picking up with the training that he had never gotten as a puppy, despite the fact that he was now around 5 years old. So Evelyn was walking Scooby in their neighborhood when they happened to walk down the road upon which David Crawford resided. Crawford and his own dog were outside, and his dog was not on a leash. He noticed Evelyn walking Scooby and came off of his porch with his German Shepherd accompanying him to helpfully let Evelyn know that his dog didn't need a leash. And maybe, if Evelyn would train her dog better, he wouldn't require that pinch collar that he was wearing. And just like that, a tone was set. Evelyn did not like this man who gave his opinions to strangers about dog rearing. She told the court during her testimony that she thought he was weird. However, living only about a half mile from the defendant, this wouldn't be the last chance he'd have to rub Evelyn the wrong way. However, the two had little reason to pay attention or deal with each other for nearly 4 years, until they were thrown together by circumstance in June of 2017. Now, the previous year, Evelyn's daughter, who was in high school, had suffered some kind of catastrophic accident. I don't know the nature of the accident, but I do know that it was stated by the prosecution that she'd had to have major surgery and had to learn how to walk again. She spent a good amount of time in a wheelchair and was using crutches to ambulate at the time of the first fire. At this time, Howard County was planning on a redistricting that would have affected both Evelyn's youngest daughter that was still living at home, as well as Dave, who at this point had custody of his granddaughter. This redistricting effort was apparently highly controversial, so in June of 2017, a grassroots organization formed of concerned citizens that began to organize to oppose these efforts. Evelyn Henderson began spearheading the effort in her community to oppose the redistricting plan and started talking to her neighbors about their options. Eventually, the community association that was attached to the Dunlogan neighborhood became involved, and that's when David Crawford reached out to Evelyn around August 12th of that year to get involved. However, within 5 days, Evelyn reports that he'd started posting on social media that he was spearheading the committee to address the issue, even though Evelyn herself had actually been spearheading it for months already at this point. At one point, there was a meeting at the Hendersons' home where Dave was seen interacting with the Hendersons' daughter, so he knew that she was mobility impaired at the time of the fire and dependent on crutches to get around. Then, this committee, which had grown rather large, came across a problem. With all of the attention and new members, they could not fit everyone into an upcoming meeting in their usual location. So they arranged to use a nearby church, and Evelyn reports that it was a packed house with standing room only. And Crawford had made a presentation, including a PowerPoint slide deck.
He's good at PowerPoint.
He so loves his PowerPoint. It's like me with Excel. I love Excel. Give me a spreadsheet.
It's like me with crayons.
Now, Evelyn was sitting near the front and began to get uncomfortable as Crawford prattled on. She testified that she could tell he was losing the crowd, and she would know. Evelyn and her husband Scott run a creative agency called Henderson Creative, and they'd owned this business for 25 years and operated it out of the basement of their home. From my understanding, her entire job is to grab people's attention for their clients. Losing the crowd in an important redistricting fight was a problem. It could erode their community support, and Dave was apparently blind to it.
All I can hear are people arguing about who's going to bring the ambrosia salad to the community social.
Well, Evelyn had no way of knowing that her next move was not going to be viewed as a helpful assist, but would instead be the impetus for a petty grudge that would begin her living nightmare. You see, Evelyn, in her attempt to help Crawford get back on track, stood up and interrupted him. In addition, she had turned to address the audience, so her back was to Crawford, and she couldn't see his face or body language change. Apparently, Crawford hated to be interrupted. People close to him reported to me that interrupting him in his personal life was a cardinal sin that would result in instantaneous response to correct the offender. However...
What do you do?
What? Oh, I get it. I'm slow. However, Dave couldn't treat Evelyn the same way he treated his family. He had to stand there and endure being upstaged, endure his points being made more clearly and concisely by another, endure being preempted by his neighbor, a woman.
Gasp.
Until now, there had been 3 people on the Executive Strategy Committee: Evelyn, a neighbor, Jean Sedlacco, and Dave Crawford. However, after this meeting, Dave made his irritation with Evelyn apparent by creating an organizational chart of authority for the committee, and he had moved Evelyn out of the executive committee position to the very bottom tier in the organizational structure. She was to step back from the executive decisions and handle the social media.
We're gonna need you to move to the basement. Yeah.
But let's set aside this initial tension between Dave and Evelyn because we don't know from testimony how it was all settled with that committee. But we do know their communication through the community association did continue. Evelyn describes their relationship as not a friendship, just an association driven together by community efforts. So beginning in September or October 2017, Evelyn was working to collect coats for a coat drive. Now, Dunlogan was a sizable community, and she posted on social media on December 8th, 2017, that they had collected over 1,000 coats that were currently being stored in their garage. They'd relocated their vehicles outside to have adequate room to sort all the coats by size, and they were storing along with them other donated items like food, diapers, formula, and water.
Dildos.
I don't think there was any dildos. Now, this is where the prosecution asks Evelyn what happened that night, and the judge asks counsel to approach. His concern is that Evelyn is clearly not a word economy person. She is a story side quest person.
A fountain of verbose.
And she and her husband that testified before her were both visibly very emotional. They both broke down on the stand. Now, the judge warned the prosecution that Evelyn was going to say too much just based on how she had described things up to this point. She was not capable of controlling her emotions, and she wasn't one to answer just the question. She was going to go, like I said, on these little side quests. So he encouraged the prosecution to ask directed questions. Now, in the early morning hours of December 9th, 2017, Evelyn described waking up around 3 a.m. in her bedroom, and she realized that the bedroom seemed foggy. She was trying to wrap her head around what was happening and realized that it wasn't fog, it was smoke. Now, her husband also awoke, as he mentioned in his testimony that he was woken by the smoke detector going off. And the pair run to the kitchen and see that the smoke is much thicker there, and Scott reports that flames were coming through the kitchen wall and smoke was pouring in through the air vents. Now, I want to pause here and discuss what this means for this family. They have been breathing toxic smoke for we don't know how long before the smoke detectors went off.
It's coming through the vents already.
The fire was up in the attic.
It's recycled a lot by now.
Now, smoke has carbon monoxide and other toxic gases in it, and as soon as you start breathing it, you begin the process of becoming hypoxic. This smoky house situation sounds a lot more benign than it is. I cannot tell you how often firefighters find victims right inside their front door just because they get so confused from hypoxia and smoke inhalation that they can't figure out how to get out a door they are literally within arm's length of. So I don't want anyone to construe this as, oh, it was just smoky. This was absolutely a deadly situation, and we're going to talk about some of the things that happened after this that tell me that the Hendersons likely were suffering some impacts of smoke inhalation. So Scott instructs Evelyn to go get their daughter as he attempts to grab a fire extinguisher and try to put out the fire that's coming through the kitchen wall. But at this point, the fire is just too big and the fire extinguisher is completely ineffective. Now, their home is a single story, so the garage is at one end, and then apparently you come in through the kitchen, and then there's like the living areas, and then there's a hallway that serves all the bedrooms at the other end. So when Scott realizes that the fire extinguisher isn't going to be effective, he runs to help Evelyn get their daughter out of the house. Now, Evelyn described their daughter as waddling like a penguin due to her mobility issues. They get her out of the house, and she realizes that their dog Scooby is still inside, and she runs back in to get him.
Ruh-roh.
Now, before anyone asks how she ran back into the house when she was clearly injured and had mobility issues, I'm going to tell you a couple things. Number one, when she got outside and was breathing fresh air, the effects of that hypoxia started reversing. And I suspect that when she first got up, not only was she shaking off sleep, she was probably slightly hypoxic, which is why she was moving slowly and stumbling a little bit. Then she gets out of the house. Her mind clears some. She realizes the dog isn't there, and now her adrenaline kicks in. She's in full knowledge that her house is on fire and it is bad, and her dog's inside, and I have no doubt that a teenager motivated by her beloved dog being in danger would have the kind of adrenaline rush that would mask her pain and allow her to run back in and save her dog.
No, it's like eating a Mario mushroom.
Exactly. So luckily, she was successful in rescuing Scooby and getting back out of the house. Meanwhile, Evelyn says she's standing on the lawn attempting to call 911, but she doesn't. She actually redials the last number she'd called in her phone. And this is the second thing that tells me that the family was likely suffering from hypoxia, because she couldn't figure out for a few minutes how to call 911. Meanwhile, Scott was reported to be standing in front of the garage crying. Not trying to call 911, not going to wake up neighbors, not trying to stop his daughter from going back into the house. These are not logical, well thought out actions of a family that is fully in grasp of all their capabilities. This family was hypoxic. They are shaking off the effects of that hypoxia. Now, I have greatly sanitized this explanation of the events of that night up to this point. The fact is that Evelyn's testimony and her grief of reliving the horror of that night and watching her house burn, it is on full display on the stand. She was crying. Even her husband broke down when he was testifying, and he was not a side quest man. He was answer the question man. But Evelyn was horrifically and understandably distraught. However, the judge took major issue with this, with Evelyn's emotional testimony. Every time she started to go down a thought process of how she was feeling or the horror of watching her home burn, the judge would get audibly irritated. And I say audibly because I couldn't see him. All I could do was hear him, but you could hear the repeatedly.
Yeah.
There were multiple bench conferences during Evelyn's testimony to the point that the prosecution got really upset. But what the judge explained to the prosecution was that, yes, this was attempted murder, and in some murder cases you might show autopsy photos to the jury in order to show the jury what type of damage was done to the victim. But you don't show every autopsy photo ad nauseum, because at some point it becomes gratuitous and prejudicial and outweighs the probative merit of the information. So the judge told the prosecution that the level of grief was inappropriate and the witness's emotional response isn't actually evidence. The emotional response would be appropriate for her victim impact statement, but not relevant as evidence unless you can specifically tie it to Dave. Now, the prosecution is understandably vexed at this statement because they're like, he tried to murder her, of course we can tie it to Dave. And the prosecution argued that the upheaval and emotional response to attempted murder is relevant. So the bench trial at this point was so tense that I was uncomfortable. I can see both sides of this argument, but I tend to agree with the prosecution on the fact that testifying to the upheaval and what happened to their family as a result of this is relevant. But I agree with the judge that the witness went too far in her side quests and a lot of the answers. She was telling a story, and because this is a trial, and the judge had already been walking this fine line the entire trial on what's overly prejudicial, how much of the defendant's other crimes are admissible, how much of the evidence is admissible to make the point without overwhelming the jury with information that has no merit, that the prosecution, in my opinion, the prosecution may have failed the witness a bit by not prepping her better on how to just answer the questions and prevent all these extraneous informational side quests that could be prejudicial. Her grief, her trauma, her crying on the stand, that's going to shine through, and it did shine through, understandably. But I don't think the prosecution did a great job of prepping her for a testimony. That said, this was an attempted murder charge. If she'd been too overly clinical, I don't think she would have really truthfully relayed the level of impact that Crawford's actions had. So I do agree that it's a fine line and a slippery slope, and I cannot fault the witness for her emotional testimony. I think anyone in her shoes honestly would have been doing a Herculean feat by not launching themselves across the courtroom to strangle the guy. So the fire department came, they put out the fire, and it was absolutely devastating. At this point, the Hendersons' daughter had been taken to a neighbor's home, but Scott and Evelyn stayed there out in the cold of a December early morning, watching their home burn, and then watching it be doused with water and extinguished until they saw just the partial skeleton of what was left. The fire had essentially destroyed the garage and had gone up into the attic space and spread through the attic. Most of the home's interior was a complete loss. The contractor said that they were able to save about 30% of the home structure. The rafters were so damaged that most of the roof had to be replaced, and the drywall in the home had been so smoke damaged that it had to be torn out and replaced. Now, the fire had been so intense. Remember, the fire got up into the roof, and this is a single-story house. The smoke was pouring down into the living areas from the vents and even from the shower heads.
Really?
For that to happen, I'm guessing that
They had to go through the return for the overflow in the tub or something?
Well, I was thinking that the plumbing pipe in the walls had to have been severed at some point, and so smoke would happen to be going through the plumbing pipes to the shower head.
Yeah, some weird convection actually pulling smoke out of that. Is that normal?
I don't recall ever seeing smoke come out of a shower head, but I don't know that it's abnormal.
They didn't even show that in Backdraft. It would have been a nice effect, though. Maybe if they make a Backdraft, too.
So the heat banks down from the attic into the living space, and Scott and Evelyn, after the fire, found that most of the things that had been stored in the tops of their closets was actually melting because of that heat layer had extended that low into the house from the attic. So while the bones of part of the house was still standing, most of the house was basically going to have to be essentially ripped down to the studs and replaced. Their two vehicles that they had moved out of the garage to store all of the donated materials, they were both melted in the driveway. They had not been set on fire, but they had been exposed to so much radiant heat that they were both complete losses. So a fire investigator did respond and was able to identify the point of origin of the fire. However, there were potential ignition sources that they couldn't rule in or out at this point. And so one of the prime suspects was some lithium-ion batteries that were stored in a Rubbermaid cabinet in the garage.
That'll do it.
I believe that they were used for lawn equipment. and they were fire damaged. But the cabinet actually melted around them, so they could not be removed from the cabinet. However, the investigator knew that the insurance company would be sending out their own investigator, so he did as much of his investigation following the requirements of NFPA 921 that he could do without actually disturbing any of the evidence. So he did his investigation with the photographs. He walked through from areas of least damage to higher damage, documenting the movement of the fire through the building, and documented the things that he could see in the area of origin that might be potential ignition sources, and ruling out the ones that he could rule out just by looking. But because he couldn't rule out the batteries, he made the preliminary cause of the fire undetermined, and that means that he just couldn't exclude the potential ignition sources that he found. So the Hendersons contact their insurance provider, and at this point, they have no idea that this fire is incendiary. And while Scott Henderson is going through the house the day of the fire with the insurance adjuster, guess who shows up to the house and knocks on the door of a half-burnt-down house?
Ronald McDonald.
Mr. David Crawford. He interrupts Scott with the insurance adjuster to ask him who his insurance company is, and if he knew anything about the cause of the fire. Now, Scott Henderson is understandably baffled that this man he barely knows shows up to his house after he loses it, and he's in shock, and he's dealing with the insurance agent to just have a chat. So Scott tells him that he's busy right now and he'll just have to talk to him later and sort of shoot him away. But that's not the only communication Crawford had with the Hendersons that day. He also picked up the phone and called Evelyn later that morning, and he wanted to know about how long it took the fire department to get there, and if the fire inspector had arrived yet, and, oh yeah, who's your insurance company? He seems to be obsessed with this insurance company question. And then there's Bill Snyder. He lived across the street from the Hendersons. On the day of the fire, Dave Crawford showed up at his house, and his wife was outside with their dogs. So she comes in and is like, Bill, there's someone outside that wants to talk about the fire. You deal with him. So Bill goes to his front door and he opens it part way, and as soon as he does, Dave Crawford tries to sort of like edge his way into the door, but Bill prevents him from coming in, and he's like, what do you need? So Dave begins asking Bill questions about what the police saw, what they knew, and could Dave view his Ring camera footage. Now Bill flat out told him, look, I don't know who you are, and there's not much to know yet, and I'm not going to talk about it. And so Dave explains, well, I'm the ex-police chief of Laurel, and I have a background in law enforcement. So basically Bill says, good for you, but I don't know you, get out of here. They did have like a little chat for like 10 minutes, but finally Bill said that he just had to tell Crawford he had other things to do and send Crawford on his way. In court, when Bill testified, he talked about the incident, saying he felt like Crawford was being like overbearing and bullying. Like when he brought up the fact that he was the former police chief, like he was like really insistent that he see this Ring camera footage. And then the day after the fire at 8:32 p.m., Evelyn received this email from the defendant. Evelyn, we were most distressed to hear of your home and its fire. Thankfully, no one was injured or worse, but nonetheless a devastating impact to your family. As you know, I spoke to Scott the same day when I learned of your fire from your neighbor on NDD, and I think NDD is Next Door Discussions. You're blessed with a good man, as he is with you. After speaking with Scott, I thought we should give you some time to figure out what are your next steps. Once you've gathered your thoughts and determined your needs, please let us know how we can help as an association or individually. Your help in the redistricting effort was instrumental and critical to our success. We would feel blessed to help. Let us know, and please remain in touch. Regards, Dave Crawford. And then he includes his phone number. When I read this email, the thing that stood out to me was, the redistricting efforts were over the summer. This fire occurred in December. And if you're reaching out to a neighbor that just had a fire, are you going to bring up the thing that you worked together on over the summer? Unless it's still really stuck in your brain for some reason, like you're still mad about it.
I don't know, why do people, I don't even care why, like, just people do. They just tend to schmooze and bring up something that they had something to do with in some way to make it relevant to whatever they're doing, right?
Okay.
I don't know. Is this nefarious?
I don't know. Looking, obviously hindsight's 2020. I feel like The fact that he reached out to Evelyn the day after the fire and specifically mentioned the neighborhood association seemed like he was saying, in his own twisted little inside joke way, this is why you had a fire, because I'm still mad about this. I could be wrong.
This guy always sounds like he's a legion of demons. Do I need to go over and exorcise this dude?
He's in prison right now, so probably
I could probably get in. What? I'm involved with the prison ministry, and when I say I could get in, I mean it in every way you thought.
He's in Maine, so you're going to have to travel if you decide to go see him.
I'll have to pack a lunch.
Then the insurance investigator shows up, and again, he doesn't want to disturb anything at the scene, because like the fire investigator from the county, if they determine that a product might be a source of ignition, a lot of times the product manufacturer will want to send out their own investigators too, because they have a vested interest in ruling out their product as a source of ignition. So the insurance investigator determines that the fire originated near the front corner of the garage, and the only competent igniter in the area would have been that battery pack. Now eventually they're able to take the batteries, and they actually have to cut the entire Rubbermaid cabinet to get the batteries. So they have the cabinet melted to the batteries with the battery with it. And they take them and they x-ray them. Now if they sustained heat damage, they would swell and the cells would rupture, and you could potentially rule them in as a cause of ignition. But the x-rays showed that all of the cells inside these batteries were intact and had not ruptured. And so the batteries were not on the charger, and the charger was stored separately and not nearby, so the insurance investigator ruled this fire incendiary because there was no other competent igniters in the area of origin.
So the batteries didn't catch on fire?
No, apparently the Rubbermaid thing melted around them enough that it insulated them so that the cells didn't rupture.
That's cool.
So this fire was incendiary. However, at this fire, they never took samples to test for ignitable liquids, like gasoline.
Did they test for lube?
No, this wasn't P. Diddy's house. I don't think they were P. Diddy fans. So the Hendersons hire a contractor, and they move into a long-term rental about a mile or two away. Now, a few weeks later, he calls Evelyn again, and this time, he's trying to ask about the fire investigator and whether or not they've determined the origin, and he wants to know once again who their insurance provider is. Now Evelyn she's trying to get moved into her new rental house, and she's had enough of him, and she just hangs up on him. Now when you're only acquaintances with someone and they hang up on you, do you continue to try to talk to them about their recent trauma?
Yes, I'm very annoying and persistent.
Okay, well, Dave Crawford did too. But I wouldn't. If somebody hangs up on me, I would assume they don't want to be my friend any longer. Now, Evelyn just hung up on him in this call because she was frustrated. She didn't want to deal with him. She had her plate full, and she doesn't care what he wants to know because it's none of his business.
That seems annoying.
It is annoying. So, on February 26th, 2 to 3 months after she's hung up on him, she gets a text from him. They're making progress, and included are 9 images of her home that's under reconstruction, including interior photos. He has let himself into her house unasked to take photos and send her pictures of the progress. Now, she has not spoken to Dave since she hung up on him, and she did not respond to that text, but she was irked. So, and that's putting it lightly, she called her contractor and told him, look, if you see this Dave Crawford guy hanging around, he's not a friend, he shouldn't be at the house, and he damn well shouldn't be in our house.
This may be as simple as there weren't enough psychos in his community. Because sometimes they cancel each other out. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
They do,
You know
yeah.
what I'm saying?
Then, about 6 months after the fire, the chatter in the neighborhoods pretty much died down over the fire. There's another neighbor that is a realtor, and she gets a text from Dave that says, hey, Vicky, I see you have a new listing near St. John's and Cressley. Good for you. Hey, since you always seem to be in the know, did they ever figure out what started the fire with E and Scott Henderson? I store a lot of things in my garage, and I'm wondering if I need to do something different. So he's still nosing around trying to figure out what they know about the fire, because he hasn't been privy to any of the investigation.
The whole thing is so arrogant.
It is.
It's just so arrogant.
Now, it takes almost a year for the home to be reconstructed. The contractor testified, like I said, that only 30% of the structure was salvageable and the rest was a tear out and rebuild. Evelyn and Scott decided that they were going to turn this home into their dream house. So they actually took out a second mortgage on the property and used that along with what they'd gotten from the insurance company to rebuild back this home as their dream home. And it was almost complete. They were weeks away from moving in when Evelyn made the following post on social media. Help needed. BGE issue. I'm hoping someone in Dunlogan has contact info for our local BGE rep. I remember when the neighborhood was having power issues, there was a gentleman from BGE that was responsible for our community involvement in our neighborhood. I think he's retired, so I'm looking for whoever replaced him. We're finishing up our rebuild after our December house fire, and we desperately need to have the power restored to our home in order to finish and move back in. We have made no progress with established customer service channels, and we're a bit desperate. Thanks in advance for helping. We miss our neighborhood and our neighbors so much, and we just want to get back home. Be well, Evelyn. So her old friend Dave is ready to jump in again, and he responds, and this occurred on September 7th, 2018. At this point, they're about 2 weeks from being able to move back in. Evelyn et al. I've had pretty good luck with BGE since we've been here. Well, good for you, Dave.
He's like a Google guide. He's a helpful fella.
The last customer rep I had for our area fixed me right up. So in that spirit, I stopped by your home in repair late this morning to see if BG&E had come out yet. According to your contractor, a few BGE reps were at your residence early this morning. I don't think they had power up yet, but the understanding was it's in the fix.
He sounds like he's like in the place with the BGE people. Like, oh, yeah, our people here at BGE, they noticed that we did, like, where's he? At home? How's he listening to this crap? How does he know any of this stuff?
Well, he lives in the same neighborhood as the house that burned down.
I'm just saying, like, how does he have enough information to pretend like...
That's what I'm saying, is that the last line was, but the understanding was it's in the fix. Have they resolved it as of this writing? Dave has clearly inserted himself here in multiple different ways. He's
like
tried...
a dick.
He's tried reaching out to...
No, I'll start that over. Dave has
inserted himself...
like a dick. Oh, sorry, do it again.
Dave has inserted himself in so
many... It
many...
feels sexual now. We're inserting ourselves over and over and over.
Dave has inserted himself so many different times and ways in this investigation. He's reached out to Scott. He's reached out to Evelyn. He showed up at their house right after the fire. He's tried to get neighbors to give him the same evidence they gave to police. He's reached out to neighbors. He's posted on social media. He is just like a sand spur.
He's like an inverted vigilante.
And so that email... or that message, response to Evelyn's message, was on September 7th, 2018. And it was 2 weeks later that Scott and Evelyn woke up to that 3 a.m. call from Bill Snyder. I'm so sorry, buddy. It's worse than before. It's gone. The house is gone. So we're going to talk about what happened in Evelyn and Scott's second fire next week. But I want to talk about, why would Dave be so obsessed with asking everyone who the insurance provider for Evelyn and Scott is? I have a theory, but I'm curious if you have a theory.
Oh, because he's looking for a future payday somehow, because...
No, I think that he's wants to know because Erie was their insurance company, and they did hire an independent investigator, fire investigator, to come and investigate the fire. And it made me wonder if other insurance companies maybe aren't so aggressive in trying to determine the cause of a fire and determine if it's arson. And maybe he thinks that if he can figure out who the insurance company is, he can get information that way. The other theory I have is that the reason he decided to pick Evelyn, because yes, she pissed him off when she interrupted him and upstaged him in that meeting, is because in the other fires that we've talked about, he has Googled fires in those areas right after the fire. He's tried to download scanners to look for them. And so he didn't get that satisfaction of being able to see the results of his handiwork and revel in it over time. And by setting a home on fire in his neighborhood, he is less than half a mile from this fire. And he knows people that know these people. And he knows them, and they're connected through like the community association and through next door groups and stuff. So he's going to get to continue to read about and revel in his arson and the effects that it's continuing to have on the family. That's my theory.
So you're saying that he's aggressively attacking people for cock blocking his mental masturbation?
No, I'm saying that in all the other fires, he didn't have direct access to the people after the fire. And I think that was an irritation for him.
That's what I'm saying.
And so now, because he's committed this fire in his own neighborhood, and he was convicted for this fire, this allows him to continue to experience the rush and the excitement of doing this to this poor family over and over and over again.
That's his mental masturbation.
Yeah, but the way you worded it seemed backwards. Like I thought you said preventing his mental masturbation. So next week, we're going to talk about the second fire that occurred at Evelyn and Scott's house and what the results of that were. And we're also going to go through the evidence that was discovered related to Evelyn and Scott's fire. And we may have an opportunity to start getting into some of the more interesting aspects of the trial that we haven't already covered. But yeah. Also, I know there are a lot of people listening to this podcast that had connections to the victims. I have Evelyn's victim impact statement. I do plan to read it. It is heartrending. It is exceptionally emotional, and I am going to read it for our audience. I haven't decided if I'm going to read the whole thing or if I'm going to use excerpts. And I don't know if this is even possible because she is a witness and the trial is pending appeal. But Evelyn, if you're listening and you would like to read your victim impact statement, crimetoburn@gmail.com. I'm happy to arrange that. And if you can't do it until after the appeal is settled, I don't mind waiting and then just reposting or posting it as a addendum to this. Just let me know that you want me to do that so I don't read it in advance. I have reached out to Evelyn, but I reached out to her through, I think, Facebook a while back, like back in like April or March. And she hasn't responded to me, and I didn't want to hound her because this is a very traumatic thing that happened in their life. And if she wants to leave it, then she doesn't owe me or anyone anything.
No, of course not. But hey, we'll treat you good, man.
Her account of the fire in court was the hardest to hear by a lot. And I know that the judge said that Miriam Scherstrom was, I think he described her as a volcano of anger ready to overflow, but I didn't hear that in her voice. But hearing Evelyn's emotion on the stand just broke my heart. I mean, obviously my heart breaks for every victim, but I think that this fire was reasonably the one that was the closest to actually killing somebody. That's part 7. We'll be back with part 8 next week. God willing and the creek don't rise.
Amen. I am the yawn in the night. I'm Skinny Chad's agent. Watch it. Don't discharge it in your own face. Again. I'm off my medication.
What medication?
The Centrum Silver. I don't know what I'm doing.
I don't know.
Do I look like a professional broadcaster to you?
Kind of. The visor does it.
I'm only good for one eyebrow. So you can't see alien pants? Do aliens wear pants?
They're wearing like a weird onesie.
Maybe do they have a butt flap, do you think? To take down if they need to?
For all I know, they can poop out their ear. I don't know.
Well, all you need to know about the Borg is that you will be assimilated.
I feel awkward.
Why?
My throat's a spawn point for frogs.
Were you just beatboxing? And I'm a deer in the headlights. I'm the one minimizing the trauma.
We don't have to behave yourself that much. It's not that kind of podcast. Make the point without prejudicing the jury. I can't say it. Prejudicing. I feel like I've ruined you.
What does Skinny Chad say about that? I don't even know who I am.
Oh, we're having an existential crisis now too? It don't help my day anymore.
I am just a neutral entity.
Be nefarious.
I am an evil entity bent on world domination. I'm emerging like a butterfly from a chrysalis. I'm doing the opposite of being a dick here.
Wiki, wiki, wiki.
Get the foot scratches, the cat meow, you going... What did you say?
I burped.
Oh, yeah.
And then I said wiki, wiki.
We're going to need to remix that.
Can you go lay down, Zulu, while we finish? She's got massive murder mittens. You want to sit up here with me while I do this? Yeah? Okay. Yeah, sit down. Where are you going?
No.
Cannot go up there.
You want to change your mind?
I'm going to have to process that for a while.
You want to change your mind?
No. Crawfish?
I don't know about that. I think that's
southern.
I think that's a little north of the crawfish line.
What just happened? Okay.
How many dildos were in the shed? 9 times out of 10, it's a razor. I'm so good at this if I don't try.
Okay, well, maybe it'll come to you. So we keep going.
Where's the sound even coming from? Will you pick that up? It's right there.
Are you going to be upset?
It's there. He was there.
Are you going to be upset if I pick it up with my toes?
No. Okay, now that I thought about it. At first, no. But then, once I had time to watch you start doing it, I was starting to become unsure. I was like, maybe we should have had a safe word.
Hey. Is that what Alphonse does? I don't know.
You're the most terrifying Arthur Franzarelli I can conceptualize.
We've talked about it before.
On a different podcast.
We did?
You're the one telling the story. I'm just trying to go along with it. I'm a yes and guy.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I just have a seizure.
At this point, they're about 2 weeks from I just burped.
It's sexy, though.
Not like that. You said you weren't going to make that noise again. Thought we had a deal. Meow. 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 Meow, meow. Meow. Meow.